the story format is what allows the human, is it the psyche, is it the brain, what's the difference, to remember things, right? So, look, I've done and looked at a lot of this research on how people understand, believe, reject ideas about climate change. And they just, as much as there's a lot of research about consumption of facts or graphs or visual representations, really most of it says that you have to tell a story, you have to tell a good story, and you have to tell an entertaining story. And I don't think that's just relevant to climate. I think that's relevant to pretty much everything.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the On the Rise podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Extavor. Have you seen any good movies lately? Last movie I saw in a theater was the Star Wars movie. I think it's called The Mandalorian and Grogu. I went with my 10-year-old. It was good. I love Star Wars. It was a classic Star Wars tale. It had all the cliches. But my 10-year-old liked it. She's starting to get into it, so that's a thrill for me. But she said something interesting after the movie was done. She said, "Daddy, that was good, but you think we could go see a climate change movie next time?" Just kidding. She didn't say that. My children never say that. I've never heard anybody say that. In fact, it's hard for me to even think about what a climate change movie might be. There aren't that many. Now, of course, we've all probably heard of or seen things like documentaries. That's probably the first thing that comes to mind when I think about TV, movies, kind of thing you can watch or stream that's somehow connected to these topics. It's a documentary, which means we're documenting and recording what's happening out there in the objective natural world. And we usually get some kind of very serious or David Attenborough treatment, right? Watch the cheetah as she crouches in the grass, low whispering voice. It's very serious. The pacing is very slow. And of course, there's a lot of zoomed in shots of nature or animals or wide shots of nature. Something else you'll notice in all these documentaries is there are no people. With the exception of the narrator, it's not a story about human beings at all. It's a story about out there, the world. It's kind of like that planet thing instead of focusing on us. Okay, but it's not totally true that there are no climate-oriented stories or TVs or films that center on people. There's another category, which I would call the disaster category. Now, we've talked about some of these things before, but I'm talking about titles like Don't Look Up, where an asteroid is going to crush Earth, Snowpiercer, where it's some kind of post-apocalyptic winterscape and everyone's on a train. There is the Wool series or the Silo series, which is also post-apocalyptic. People are living in these underground tunnels. Waterworld I've brought up. Deep Impact. Even The Great Flood, which is a Netflix movie I watched a couple months ago. I think it came out last year. Korean movie. Not really a climate movie, but a disaster movie. Centers on people. Gets a little bit weird at the end. I won't spoil it. So we do have another category that are thrilling disaster movies, maybe even, action movies, but they usually have sour endings, right? None of those things end well. Think about Don't Look Up. Think about Waterworld, Snowpiercer. They don't exactly wrap up nicely. So it's just got me thinking, is it possible to have a compelling human-centered climate story that's also entertaining and that doesn't necessarily have to have a bad ending? Not that I need everything to wrap up in a storybook Hollywood ending, but it just introduces a broader range, comedy, drama. Could we do a rom-com about climate or energy or technology or something like that? If it sounds ridiculous as I'm saying these words, maybe it is. But here's a couple examples of films that I really like that are not about nature. They're not about David Attenborough, British whispering reverence for the natural world. They're not about unsolvable problems, for instance, like a lot of our disaster flicks are. But they're actually about people solving problems. Now, yes, they do have a bit of technology bent, and I am a technology person. I don't think it's a coincidence. Maybe it is. But I'm going to name Interstellar. Very long movie, very weird, probably needed an editor, but it features people working together to try to solve big problems. The other one is Hail Mary, which I absolutely loved, came out a few months ago. Somebody told me the basic construction of the movie is buddy cop. Two dudes, two people, generate a story, a relationship. They have love for one another. And that is the nexus of the movie. Yes, it's about humanity and solving problems and blah, blah, blah. But the heart of the movie and the thing that gives it heart, sorry to be punny, is the connection between two people. So thinking about stories, thinking about movies, thinking about how we can approach climate-oriented topics, is a perfect way to introduce today's guest, Sabrina McCormick, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, writer, director, also IPCC author, that's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are the big consensus scientific climate reports that are published every few years. She's a big deal. She translates her academic research into filmmaking. Here is Sabrina McCormick. I want to start with a weird sort of statement question. I lived in LA for many years, and one of the weird things about LA is that everyone calls himself a storyteller, for better or for worse. I don't want to make it seem shallow, but I'm just curious if there's something you've noticed, or am I making this up?
No, I think you're probably right, although I think it started a few years ago. And maybe it has something to do with how much is trying to grab for our attention right now, and how important storytelling has actually become to that struggle, that landscape of, me. And so people who are somehow professional storytellers, maybe there's a bigger job market for it, or, that's more marketable in some way than it used to be. Because if you don't get eyeballs now, you don't sell the thing, you don't get the whatever. It's like such a rush for attention.
Yes.
And there's just so much content, right?
So much content. Here we are. Like, this isn't news, but
let's make some more.
Listen, but this is the good stuff, though. This is the good stuff. This won't melt your brain.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of, honestly, I was not allowed to watch TV growing up. Okay.
Me either.
Oh, you seriously?
The TV, just real quick. The TV was like, I had to ask my parents, can I watch this show?
Yeah.
Like in person or at the time. And the answer was always no, unless it was 5 o'clock and Sesame Street was on, or it was what my parents thought was a culturally appropriate sitcom, which meant The Cosby Show. But go on.
The Cosby Show.
Sesame
so
Street
my
and the Cosby
TV,
Show.
the TV in my house was in a like a console with a big mirror on it, and it had like this doorknob thing. And my mom and I were constantly, I was like, I want no, this whole thing. And so, okay, I was allowed a half hour a week. And what did I watch? Okay, nerd alert, Cosmos. Okay, which is a crazy kind of, I guess, coincidence that when we were up for the Emmy for The Years Living Dangerously, we were up against, for best writing, Carl Sagan's wife, who was the writer, right? And she won, which, thank you. That shaped my life. But in any case, I would watch Cosmos. That's what I would watch. So I wasn't allowed to watch TV. And so now here I am, like, I don't know, did I have a lot of baggage in my childhood from not being allowed to watch TV? And so now I have to make media shit. I don't know, but why did I even start this story?
On the subject of unpacking baggage, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of television, but I also sort of watched as much as I could get my hands on at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, it's not like I'm above TV, but I always wanted to be on the radio. And so this is frankly my best attempt at getting on the radio.
Okay,
my parents were both big radio hounds. My mother especially listened to the radio, both my parents really. And my father worked at the local TV station, which was actually a big media network. So
what did he do?
Sometimes he was a camera operator, I think, earlier on.
Okay. Yeah.
But then later he worked in sort of like the technical production of live television, specifically related to commercials, when that stuff was done more by tape and by hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where my engineering interest came up to. I grew up around a lot of gear, but like microphones and mixers and camera equipment.
Yeah.
And then later I got into, lasers and electronics and other stuff that I made a career.
Okay.
Of.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Always interested in mics and audio. Okay. But you said something really funny and then also really interesting and deep I want to pick up on. You talked about
my baggage. We're going to get straight into it. The childhood baggage. Let's go there.
Look, I mean, maybe that's where it begins. You were talking about the attention economy. You said something like maybe people need to think about storytelling more because there's more of a pressure to sort of sell, or this phrase people use, be a brand. But there's also something that you said earlier, which you kind of glazed over. I want to come back on. You said something like, it's so important to our society, and it's maybe always been important to our society. And that touches on a deeper point that I've heard a lot of folks make, that storytelling is a really important part of humanity. I don't want to get too sanctimonious, but humanity with the capital H. It's something we do. It's part of our culture. not just, and this is what I want to ask you, is it part of our culture that we've inherited and it's with us? Or do you think it's an essential part of our culture and something we need to maybe even protect and not lose? Do you know what I'm asking?
I mean, maybe I think, look, there's all kinds of studies about this, right? I think that what they say, at least my read, is that the story format is what allows the human, is it the psyche, is it the brain, what's the difference, to remember things, right? It's like creating a psychological coherence around phenomena that are otherwise disparate and disconnected. So, look, I've done and looked at a lot of this research on how people understand, believe, reject ideas about climate change, and they just, as much as there's a lot of research about consumption of facts or graphs or visual representations, really most of it says that you have to tell a story, you have to tell a good story, and you have to tell an entertaining story. And I don't think that's just relevant to climate. I think that's relevant to pretty much everything. I mean, look, like, I have traditionally had a pretty, like, not encyclopedic, that was my grandfather, but I can remember facts and stuff. But people aren't talking about facts at the water cooler. They're really
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that just started, in the past 100 years or since TV or since the play, or I think that's human. I mean, that's what we see in graphics and inside of, cave walls, right? These are really stories that are being told about the human condition. And, yeah, so I think that's in terms of your question about being protected. Yes. I mean, I think what's happening right now in the media landscape is highly problematic in regards to, and I'll just speak to what I know,
Yeah.
the difficulty it is to produce, create, and distribute independent films, independent media, right? That doesn't rely on a conglomerate, big bucks funder telling you what to make. And it's really hard now. And I think it's really important to a vibrant civil society.
Okay, so you said a lot of great things there, and I want to come on to this point about why you think it's so difficult before we unpeel some of the other stuff. I think I've heard the story or a version of stories about why independent filmmaking is so tricky, and from what I can understand, it usually comes down to something about the way the business and the finance works, and that's maybe an oversimplification. But to a layperson like me that doesn't understand really how the industry works at that level, I also think, well, but people like me and a lot of my friends and people I know say there's a lot of craving for new and independent stories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a oversimplified question. How is it there's such a demand, I guess, for new and independent stories? Not just new, but independent storytelling, filmmaking, let's say. And yet the business, at least the profit-seeking side of the business, struggles to connect with that. What am I missing?
I mean, it's complicated. It's
Yeah,
really
sure.
complicated. But when you ask that question, one thing that just jumps to mind is an example of why it's difficult is, I'm working on a project that has a lead male and a feature project that has a lead male and a lead female. And to be totally transparent, I was trying to decide how old the lead female should be
Mm-hmm.
and what the market would be for that. Struggling with this idea that I didn't know the facts on until I researched it, that most lead females are under 40, right? They say that it's really hard as an actress to get a role once you're over 40. So I'm like, okay, is that because it's actually less marketable to
Mm-hmm.
have a lead female who's over 40, or is it something else? So I asked my AI to tell me, and then I did a little of due diligence on that. Getting the my dog is really very insistent on having some kind of
Joining the
thing in my
story.
lap.
We'll
What's
consider
that?
it. I said joining the story. We'll consider it.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. And so in that particular instance, apparently doesn't make a story less marketable. doesn't. In fact, in many instances, it makes it more marketable. So I'll just say that Meryl Streep's biggest budget success was when she was 63. So, and that's just one example, right? But so what I discovered in this process, which is not rocket science, is that it's the industry gatekeepers that are not allowing women over 40 to go onto screen. This is just one example of how the industry gatekeepers will shape what you and I end up seeing. Why do we end up seeing these things? Because they hold the reins for the marketing dollars, back to this point, right, about the grab for eyeballs. And independent film, like right now, and this is, I think, is maybe a more relevant answer to your question. It's like there's nobody buying it right now. There's very little buy. There's a lot of content and not that much purchasing. And I'm talking about like $1 million to $3 million films.
I'm much closer to just being an audience member when it comes to films again, but even I could notice things like, oh, another sequel, or
exactly,
we're going to make the film version of a 3-part novel, but it's going to be 27 films, or it's going to be 3 seasons of 12 episodes each, sort of like the stretching and going back. And so, I've read and heard more about that, but it plays into what you were talking about.
Absolutely. The rationale is that there's an existing audience. And so they have more economic confidence and an ROI that than if they fund, and those things are generally pretty big budget, right? So they think that the ROI is more likely with that than, say, a low budget indie, but that's just not the truth. That's just not what the numbers say. The numbers for entertainment are exactly what the numbers are for business. More diverse groups making more diverse content, like it's just a predictor of success, right? And that's true of who you have behind the camera, in front of the camera, all the things. Apparently a more diverse cast, and I'm talking about racially diverse, guarantees a higher success in terms of economic return on project. So it's not, I don't know what's, it's all the things, it's all the systematic norms and isms and all of that are the problem here, of course.
I like a nice, tidy explanation. So I guess
there we go.
No, but what you are saying makes sense. And I can, as I said, I can sort of see the evidence of that even from the outside, just as somebody flicking through channels, never mind if you try to think more about it. But let me switch gears a little bit and ask you about just kind of breaking it down on a really basic level. How do you even start to, in the midst of all that landscape that you've talked about, you're still an independent artist, you're still an independent creator, you're still an independent filmmaker, working on features, working a lot of other things for now. Okay.
No, it feels like maybe tomorrow, who knows?
They say you should live in the present.
I try. I meditate. I try.
I would like you to meditate on what is sort of a process of approaching an independent film, whether you have a traditional process you like to use, or maybe thinking about a most recent project. How do you get started, and what are the sort of rough steps you go through? I'm thinking from a perspective of like creative process for someone out there that is working on a piece of music, a piece of writing, articulating an idea, a diagram, a film. Talk a little bit about how you approach these things, and then maybe how it might be a little bit different if you weren't in the independent setting. How do you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, independent any of the stuff that I do is really different than the commercial side. Commercial side usually being, we have an idea and we need to hire a writer, and there you go. My process varies from project to project. Traditionally my film work has come out of my academic research work. And mainly because those are topics I'm interested in, I'm driven to understand better and to really then share with the world. But just to stick to the creative process, it can be anywhere from, like, I'll just speak to a script that my co-writer and I have that is out to I'll just remain nameless, an A-list female lead. That project, which is about a super important environmental Supreme Court case.
Okay.
It started based on this. I mean, I did 10 years of research on climate change lawsuits and came upon this story, and it was a great human story. And I couldn't believe, I would, go to parties, whatever, and people had not, I mean, when I say people, I mean real climate people, this is a climate story,
Okay.
had never heard of this case. And I was kind of like, how is that true? And
Interesting.
so
Yeah.
we wrote this, and look, we fictionalize it a lot, but having the basis of the real, I should say that we shot a documentary about it first, and having met all the people in it,
Okay.
and you know, discovered who was like a real funny character and who was like a very stiff, it was like,
I see.
it was
Okay.
great, because then we got to really, now I should say, once we wrote the fiction version, and then now we've been talking to the real life people about the fiction, it becomes more challenging.
Okay, hold on. Let me slow you down for a second. I just want to make sure I'm following the process. So this example you're giving, because subject of your rigorous academic research, entry version of it, where I guess you're developing the story further, you're getting to know some of the characters, people, the real people and personalities involved.
Yeah.
Then you work on a fictionalized version, still of the same ideas and stories.
Yeah.
And now into production of that fictional version. Am I with you?
Well, we don't have the funding for that yet.
Okay.
But it is out to being attached. I mean, in my ideal world, this actress would attach it, and then that would allow us to finance it, and then we would make it. Okay. But yes, that is the process.
We're living in the present, heading into the future.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, sorry, I cut you off. So what does that future process sort of look like for you, or how has it looked in other projects?
Yeah, so with that one, we'll wait to hear back from her, and then if she says yes, which she has to, no, I'm just kidding, then I will try to find people, essentially climate adjacent, either philanthropists or people who care about it, who have money to fund it. That's kind of like the independent film trajectory, right? Is to find investors, or in my case, philanthropists who want to get behind a project. So that's one kind of real world way of doing it. I mean, often.
Can I jump in with a question here?
Yeah.
How far along, and you should tell me to shut up if I'm prying too much, but how far along, or how much of the concept or project do you have to have complete in order to get to that pitching stage? So you talked about securing the lead of your choice.
Yeah.
Does the entire script have to be written? Do you start shooting? Help me understand, like, where you know how to stop, or maybe that's the big question.
Well, honestly, I've done every type, right? Okay. So the feature that I made in Brazil, Sequestrada, I had a small grant from the UN, actually, and we started shooting. This was in the Brazilian Amazon in the context of what became a huge international human rights violation for 22 indigenous tribes in the Amazon, the construction of the world's 4th largest dam. We started shooting, and then we used a little piece that we got cut together to get more funding. But that's very unusual. Typically, this process will fall into 2 categories, and I have projects that fall into both of those categories right now. One is you write the script, you attach ideally a famous bankable star, and then you go get the funding. The other, and I have a series concept at this stage, is a pitch project. So you have like a treatment, you outline, you do kind of bio descriptions of some of the main characters. You paint the picture of what the world will be in, short synopses of a couple of episodes, and then you go pitch that to studios, because studios actually generally don't want the concept to be too developed. When it comes to TV, especially, they don't want the concept to be too developed, because they want to shape it in their image, right? Each one of them have their own image. So If you bring in something that's too far along, then that's not appealing.
Okay. I want to ask you about medium. We talked about drowning in content earlier. There are a lot of different media out there. Maybe a 2-part question. One, which are you most comfortable in, or where do you feel like your voice maybe sings the loudest or highest? And the second question is it easier or harder to be a filmmaker, storyteller, as the media seem to be expanding and expanding?
It's harder. I mean, just to answer your questions in reverse order, I think it's Well, look, there's so many things changing at once. It's hard to say. It's just because it's expanding. It's more available, right? Everybody can get a camera and shoot a thing. And I mean, maybe it's just harder for a lot of reasons, but
are those people really
yeah.
competitive with you though? Or other people that have been doing it a while, have more skill, have more of a critical eye? Maybe it's just signal and noise.
Yeah. No, I do think. I mean, it's different. Yeah, certainly it's different, right? Like, you know, I have access to people and networks and whatever knowledge other people don't have. But, you know, in Hollywood, it's like always the hot new young blah blah. Any role, director,
Sure.
whatever
Yep.
it is, right? So that's also a resource. Um, I mean, there's always a shifting dynamic of what the kind of what you're playing to, right? I mean, just your question earlier about what's changed. It's always changing.
Yeah.
But I personally, you know, I feel squarely most comfortable in the 90-minute feature. I don't feel good. I don't feel really, and just to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like not growing up with TV, I'm not very good with TV. I don't really understand the 5-act structure, which is what TV is usually 4 or 5 acts. I have a lot more experience writing in the 3-act structure. But it also kind of makes sense to me. And I mean, I can explain how that works if that's helpful, but it's like, you know, act 1, establishing a normal world. Here are your characters. Here are your people. Here's what's going on. Here is the dilemma that is being posed, or the inciting incident, as it's called, that you're going to have to spend the rest of the fucking film resolving, right? And then when you enter the new world of trying to resolve that, then it's the 2nd act.
Okay, hold on. This is really good. Imagine you're speaking to like someone who knows nothing about filmmaking and is scribbling down everything you say because they're gonna go try to write their first, you know, that might be me, but it might be somebody listening. So act 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best person to do that, but
you're on fire.
You're
doing it. I shouldn't have interrupted you. Act 2. Now we're in that world.
Yeah. So Act 2 almost always, and spoiler to every big budget or I mean, most movies follow this, right? Not all, but, and I love it when they don't. But as you turn into the 2nd act, your character, your lead, is in a new world, right? So they've got a new job. They're living in a new location. Their life has changed radically to the degree that they're going to spend the whole 2nd act struggling through addressing whatever was posed in the 1st act as the issue. And in the 2nd act, and this is the bulk of the film, right? So the 1st act is about 25, 30 pages, or 25, 30 minutes. A minute is a page. And then you turn into the 2nd act, and the challenges, the obstacles to the resolution of the dilemma that's been set up just mount until you get to the end of the 2nd act, at which point they have probably died, or it appears they've died, and then they come back to life for the 3rd act, right? Yeah, not dead. Or, you know, just the example of Bridesmaids is popping to my mind. I have no idea why, right? So I love Bridesmaids. I think it's hilarious.
Yes.
I totally saw that without knowing what I was getting into, and I just I wanted.
It's probably even better. Even better.
So good. Exactly. I had no idea. And I walked in, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. And then at the end of the 2nd act, Kristen Wiig, she thinks she's lost her best friend forever. You know, there's no going. I mean, she's lost her job. She's lost the cute guy. She's lost her best friend. It's a shit. Like, life is just a shit, and there's no coming back. And then Megan, what's the actress's name? Anyway, her friend comes and punches her. You get back up. You get back up.
Yes.
Up, right? And so then she does, right? She does. And your lead has to go and face the climax. Like, this is the ultimate confrontation with, generally it's the bad guy, right? Okay. Who is the bad guy? And just to keep going, the Bridesmaids example, it's that other best friend who she's been competing with, who is just perfect, right? She's just perfect, and she does everything right and whatever. Yeah. And they have to have a face off where the
All right.
truth comes out and then it's,
Big showdown.
resolution. So now I'm shouting because
No.
it's
You're
so
speaking.
fun that
Okay.
that
You're,
movie.
you're speaking with passion. You broke down the 3-act film structure with Bridesmaids as examples in 2 and 3. I want to switch gears in a minute and start to talk a little bit about climate-specific filmmaking. You alluded to that a little bit. You've told us a lot about how you think about it and approach it, and now I want to get into a conversation about how we can think about climate storytelling and how you specifically think about it. But before we do, just to put you on the spot a little bit, and we can riff on this, do you have any general or specific tips or recommendations for aspiring filmmakers or storytellers, or people that don't consider themselves up and coming? Maybe they're toward the end of their career, but they're interested to tell stories maybe for the first time or maybe to a new audience. Any tips for storytellers that may come to mind about maybe, the creative process, production, mindset, how to approach it? What do you think?
You mean in terms of climate or in general?
I would say generally. We can save some of the climate stuff for the second half, but whatever comes to mind. I'm curious what comes to mind for you.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say some things that are maybe weird. I get all of my best ideas in meditation.
Say more.
Really, I get only get good ideas in meditation. And I don't have a complicated way of meditating. I've been doing it a long time, but I'm not like, I can't give you meditation tips. But typically for me, I have to quiet. I mean, the mind is never quiet, right? There's always that's what the mind is. However, if I can just sit without, acting on my impulses, without, checking my phone, just sit quietly, focus on my breathing. And look, you don't have to sit. You can walk. You can stand. You can lie down, whatever the form is. But for me, it helps to close my eyes and really just focus on the breath. The mind will keep doing its thing, and I keep bringing my attention back. For me, it's my nose. I don't know why. I focus on the breath in my nose. And if I will just keep doing that, things will become clear to me that I've been struggling with, right? So our conscious mind is going to do a lot of work. So let's say you have a story idea and you're thinking, what should it be? What should I do? What should it look like? Fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Also, that's not the whole picture. There's a lot going on in your subconscious that you really, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, I can't bring to the fore consciously. I have to give it the space to do it itself. I don't know. I'm not a meditation guru. I don't know why I'm talking about this so much. This is not my expertise at all.
Sounds like it. No, what I can definitely relate to sort of the stillness and having a bit of distance from your ideas. I definitely get caught up in my own shit all the time. And I can also get very in my head about my own ideas in particular.
Okay.
And so anything that I can find to get objectivity about my own ideas, like, was this just was this a crazy passing thought?
Yeah, right.
Is this actually one of your rare, very good ideas that you need to really study? And something like,
how do you figure that out? Do you have a way of knowing that? Because I don't know.
It's not like I'm being attacked by horrible thoughts and brilliant thoughts all day. But
yes, you are.
I mean, flattery will get you everywhere. No, but no, the thought that I'm not sure which idea is which is like truly terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Tips for young filmmakers. I want to pin you down on this before we take a quick break. Tip number 1, meditate. Okay.
Yes.
Tip number 2. Give me tips number 2 and 3.
I don't know. I think make a lot of friends. Yes. I know that there are a lot of introverts out there, and I get that. I really do.
But I can produce and edit and film all in my bedroom, and I can just produce all my stuff.
Some people can do kind of like that, but filmmaking is the most collaborative art form I have ever encountered.
Okay.
And you got to find your people. You got to build your team. You got to hone that team. And the only way you do that is by getting out there, meeting people, seeing work you like, talking to those people, building your crew, as it were.
This is
really,
great.
really important.
This is sage advice. Meditation brings wisdom. Okay. Any last thing? Young filmmaker, what? They're going to meditate. They're going to not meditate full time. They're going to get out of their apartment and meet people. And
I would say the main thing that has resulted in any successes I've had is persistence. Certainly intelligence helps, but that we're not, we all have different kinds of intelligence. And I actually think persistence is more important. And so whatever you can do to develop the grit to just keep getting at it, whatever it is, just do that. Because I think being sensitive is a useful skill set, but also kind of being able to say, okay, I'm just going to keep going, even though that hurt or that was hard or that was it, it's just be persistent. I mean, that's it. It's kind of horrible. It's just that.
Perfect note to end on. Dr. Sabrina McCormick, filmmaker, scholar, storyteller. Thank you for this, and we'll see you on the flip side. That brings us to the end of part 1 of my conversation with Sabrina McCormick, filmmaker, writer, director. Probably my favorite and weirdest part of the episode was the detour into meditation. But look, if it works, it works. I had fun with that. If you love this conversation, you're not going to want to miss part 2, which will come out next week. In it, Sabrina connects how the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa is related to climate solutions. She gives some tips to young and aspiring filmmakers. We continue that conversation. She talks a little bit about her upcoming film, a movie she's working on right now. And she also talks about the 7 typical or classic story forms or structures that seem to have been with us through hundreds or thousands of years. And we talk through which ones of those seem like they're actually best suited to telling climate stories. Thank you very much to my producer, Vish. Thank you to Sabrina for being part of this. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love your support. We love hearing the early feedback. You can always catch us on audio on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you're watching here on YouTube, we love your subscriptions. We love your like. We love your shares. We really appreciate that. That's how we get great people like Sabrina in here. Of course, we look forward to the next episode, and we can't wait to hear from you at podontherise@gmail.com. You can write to us anytime. That's podontherise@gmail.com. And now here is the music of the great Claire Davis to take us out. Until soon, y'all.